Let's see what happens when we now set it to -2. So we'll run this. And scroll up here to see what happened. It says the number of sides is 6, which is what we expected, right? They tried to set it to 2. I see I need a space here. They tried to set it to -2, which is not an allowed side, so we set it to the default value of 6. So that looks good, right? And when we look at this dice down in the array of dice, here it is, and we get the dice with 6 sides and a value of 12. Oops, that's a problem. How can you have a 6-sided dice that has a value of 12? That, right? Because a 6-sided dice, the maximum number it can be is 6. So what happened here? We created the dice in this array, and it had 16 sides. And then we rolled it, and when we rolled it, it got the random value of 12, which was legitimate when it was a 16-sided dice. Then we set the number of sides to 6, but the value stayed at 12. So now we have an invalid dice, right? It has 6 sides and a value of 12. So we're not quite there yet. Let's go back to the set number of sides and see what we need to do here. So when we set the number of sides, we also have to address the issue to make sure that the value is in the correct range. Well, one way we could do that is to set the value like we did in the constructors. We just pick, okay, we're going to always set it to 2, or we're always going to set it to 3. But we don't have a default value that's the most common dice, the most common value for a dice. What is the most common number that faces up? There isn't such a thing. So another thing we could do would be call our roll method. So notice what roll does. Roll sets the value, and it sets it using a random number, and that random number is in the correct range, right? It uses the current number of sides to make sure that the random number is in a range that is valid. So this is a way we could create it to be valid. So here what we could do is the number of sides is set either to 6 or to the number they sent. And when after that's done, after the number of sides is set, we can simply call roll. And that will produce a random number and set it to the value, and it will for sure be valid. So let's run this and see if we get that result. So now what happens with that 4th dice? Okay, it sets the number of sides to 6, and here we have it. Dice with 6 sides, and now the value is 4, which is valid. Let's run it again. We would expect that this will be different since we're doing a random number, and see what its value is. Oh, yep, this time it's 6, still a valid value. And we could run this several times till we're really comfortable that both the number of sides and the value are both valid. There we got a 6 again. That can happen with random numbers, right? You can get the same one twice in a row or more, and there it's back to 4. So we can keep running that till we're really comfortable that that's a safe value. So now that we've got this a safe value and that we've determined that set number of sides will remain always valid, at least when we set the number of sides. Is there another time when besides this method that we change the number of sides? Here we use it, but we're not changing it. Here we don't use it or change it. Here we've really supervised it. If we go up here to the number of sides, up here to the constructors, notice that we set it. In this case, we set it to 6, which is a valid value, so that's okay. But in the other constructor, what are we doing? We're setting it equal to whatever value they sent. So in this case, we could create a dice that is invalid. And so we want to supervise this as well. We want to say, no, you can't just set it to anything. Now, there's a couple ways we could do that. We could rewrite all of this code, but we know that's a bad idea, right? We know that duplicating code, having the same code in different places, is not a good idea. It's number one, a waste of code. Number two, a waste of typing. Number three, they can become different one from another. Anyway, there's lots of reasons why we don't want to duplicate code. So what we can do here is we already know that SetNumberOfSides method is valid and that it keeps everything the way it needs to be. So let's just simply call that. And this is, it's public, which means main can use it, but it also, we can use it, even if it's public. It doesn't have to be private for a dice method to use it. So here we have a dice method, and it can access the private data members and the public methods. So what do we want to set it to? Well, we want to set it to the value that they sent, and we don't care what value they sent because this method, SetNumberOfSides, will do the supervision for us, right? It'll double check, make sure that if it's less than 2, it'll set it to that default value of 6. If it's not, it'll set it to the number. So we can call this method and be very comfortable that it's going to end up with a valid number of sides. So look how easy that is. It just straight up call that method and we're good to go.